Coming up on Network Africa, now that Baher Mohammed and Mohammed Fahmy are back in prison and Peter Gresta is limited in his reportage, what does Al Jazeera plan to do? We have the latest from Doha. And despite the international criticism which Egypt is facing, parliamentary election dates are announced. They will now hold on the 18th and 19th of October. Later on, we take a deeper look at the crisis in South Sudan now that the 8th peace deal has collapsed, with fighting erupting in parts of the world's newest country. Hello there and welcome to Network Africa on Channels Television with me, Cynthia Are. Now, just before we bring you the latest concerning the jailing of the Al Jazeera journalist from Doha, we will like to fill you in on the top 3 stories which made headlines on the African continent over the weekend.
And now we're getting signals that from the government and my lawyers that tomorrow the judge will indeed announce the verdict.
24 hours after this exclusive with Network Africa, Mohammed Fahmy and Baher Mohammed are now behind bars. The court found the duo, along with their deported Australian colleague Peter Gresta, guilty of various charges ranging from biased reportage to improper documentation to unregistered equipment to broadcasting from hotel without permission. Baher Mohammed was given an extra 6 months for being in possession of bullet casing he picked up during a demonstration. The charges are a clear deviation of the initial charges which sat the journalist and were aiding the Muslim Brotherhood, which has now been labeled a terrorist organization. As always, the trio and Al Jazeera deny these charges.
As you know, I'm also convicted and also sentenced to 3 years in prison. I'm also innocent. There is never any evidence that the court presented, that the prosecutor presented, either in the first trial or in the second, to confirm any of the allegations against us. And in fact, I'd like to publicly challenge the prosecutor to present evidence of anything that we produced that was falsified. The fact is that we did nothing wrong, that there was no evidence of wrongdoing, that these guys are innocent men, and innocent men are in prison. That's what this is about.
Then, despite the signing of the highly anticipated 8th peace deal, South Sudan government troops on Sunday reportedly attacked a village in the country's unity state. The ceasefire was scheduled to begin the same day of the attack and only 1 day prior. Spokesman for the UN mission in South Sudan, Joe Contreras, reported that violence in the South Sudan had continued between the country's warring factions into the weekend, despite the approaching ceasefire. Finally, bodies of migrants who perished at sea when their boat sank off the Libyan coast Thursday evening continued to wash ashore on Friday, August the 28th, with officials estimating the death toll at 100 so far. Libyan Red Crescent officials roamed the beaches of the Libyan coastal town of Jezeera on Friday, discovering at least 7 bodies, according to a Reuters correspondent who was accompanying the search team. More than 80 bodies have since been recovered since Thursday, August the 27th.
Well, as it did on Saturday, the United States has said it's deeply disappointed and concerned at the 3-year jail sentences passed in Egypt on 3 Al Jazeera journalists. The U.S. State Department is urging Egypt to redress the verdict, and the State Department spokesman John Kirby said in a statement, quote, "We urge the government of Egypt to take all available measures to redress this verdict, which undermines the very freedom of expression necessary for stability and development. The freedom of the press to investigate, report, and comment, even when its perspective is unpopular or disputed, is fundamental in any free society and essential to democratic development." End of quote. Well, we're joined by the Senior Public Relations and Media Person for Al Jazeera from Doha, Mr. Hassan Patel. Mr. Patel, thank you very much for your time again on Network Africa.
Good evening. I hope you're well.
Good evening. Now, we already know Al Jazeera's stance on this matter, but from the monitoring that we did over the weekend, I do recall Al Jazeera saying that it would intensify the Free AJ Staff campaign. How exactly do you plan to do that? What is the focus in this case?
I think the focus is to try and get some kind of push on the diplomatic and political front. This has become a political case. The judge basically announced on the day of the verdict that these men aren't journalists, so they politicized it rather than looking at it from a legal perspective. So it's our job to try and ensure that we keep that momentum going, and we have got that momentum. The Americans, the Canadians, the British, the European Union, the Australians, and various other NGOs and media organizations came out in support of the Al Jazeera staff who were wrongly imprisoned again. And also on social media, we saw the Free AJ staff hashtag moving, trending upwards. However, like I say before, it's now a political situation, and I think we need to put diplomatic pressure to ensure that President Sisi, wherever he goes, wherever he meets, is constantly asked, President Sisi, when will you free the Al Jazeera staff?
In truth, I must ask at this point, is there now any clarification on whether the sentence given already includes the time that was served by Baher Mohammed and Mohammed Fahmy?
It does include the time served. So we just need to get the formalities sorted of what that time serves means. Does it mean from the arrest to them coming out on bail, or does it mean from sentencing to bail? But regardless of that, they've been put back in behind bars. There was not one shred of evidence which highlighted that we proposed fake news, that we aided and abetted a terrorist network, and that we were doing anything illegally. I think people need to understand something. As an international news organization, we can be in any country as long as we follow the right procedures, but we don't need a broadcasting license when we're in that country, because we're not reporting to that country or adhering to local laws. And I think it doesn't matter what evidence you put up against Al Jazeera, this is purely now a political case.
Now, just if I let you go, Mr. Patel, is there anything your network is doing differently or plans to do differently to ensure that history doesn't repeat itself in terms of protecting your staff?
I think we took every single decision capable within our boundaries to ensure that our staff were protected. We did all our health and safety checks. Our staff knew what was going on. We didn't force anybody. The question here, I personally think at this moment, is not to ask what Al Jazeera could or could not have done. Even if there was an administrative error, you do not put 3 men behind bars for 10 years and then 3 years for something so minuscule. The fault lies with the Egyptian authorities. And I think one thing before I can conclude is that this isn't a message to Al Jazeera. This is a message, as one of my former colleagues who works for another news network said, to international journalists that have basically been told, be careful, this could be you. But more importantly, there are 68 journalists behind bars in Egypt. The Egyptians say they don't have no journalists behind bars, but there are 68 journalists behind bars. So it basically tells the Egyptian journalists, be careful what you write, or you can end up behind bars.
Well said, Mr. Hassan Patel. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate your input as always. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Mr. Hassan Patel is a senior public relations and media person for Al Jazeera, reporting from Doha. Still to come on Network Africa. Despite the international criticism which Egypt is facing, parliamentary election dates are announced. They will now hold on the 18th and 19th of October. Welcome back. You're still watching Network Africa on Channels Television. Now, despite the international condemnation which it's received and how it's handled the case of the Al Jazeera journalists, Egypt has turned its attention to other matters and is ready to hold its parliamentary elections. This is essential as Egypt has been without a parliament since June of 2012, when a court dissolved the democratically elected body. The head of Egypt's High Elections Committee, Ayman Abbas, announced that the first round of voting will begin on October the 18th And voting was originally scheduled for March of this year, but was delayed when a court ruled part of the election law unconstitutional. The second round of voting is now scheduled for late November, and the government says the parliamentary election is proof of Egypt's commitment to democracy. For more on this development of the parliamentary elections, we go live to Cairo, where the Voice of America's Heather Murdoch is standing by. Heather, thank you so much for joining us. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Now, how are Egyptians reacting to the possibility of a new parliament in just a couple of months?
Well, some people are quite excited about it. One thing the parliament may do is it might show Egypt as a more legitimate government, and it might ease the fears of some international investors. That's what Egyptians are hoping for anyway. There's also a bit of cynicism about elections here, because all of the elections since Mubarak fell in 2011 have been fraught with problems. And so people are hoping they will go peacefully and they will go successfully and represent the people, but there's a lot of cynicism about it.
Ask about the timing right now. Could it be that there's a sense of urgency to review some laws passed in Egypt recently? I'm asking if that could have contributed to the need for the elections to come up the way they have.
Well, there is, about 2 weeks ago, a very controversial law that was passed that is an anti-terrorism law. It's controversial because opponents say that it will be used to silence opponents and the press. However, that I don't think that these kinds of laws are why the parliamentary elections are coming up so soon, because President Sisi, who passed the law by decree, was a big part of getting these elections off the ground and getting it started. But it does raise an important question about what the new parliament is going to do. Is this parliament going to review all of the laws Sisi has been passing by decree with no lawmakers in place? So that's what we're hoping to find out.
Yeah, indeed, we'll have to wait for that. But based on what you just said, bringing up the anti-terrorism bill, I had to ask at this point, based on what happened, what we saw happen on Saturday with the jailing of the journalists and also this new anti-terrorism bill, which many have condemned, would you say it is safe to be a journalist in Egypt?
Well, a lot of the journalists here, including myself, are asking the same question. Last week, we were talking about this new law, and one of the thoughts is the new law in terms of journalism might not even be applied to journalists. In fact, it could be on paper to quiet criticism and to get people to censor. But we were also all really shocked by the Al-Jazeera decision. Most people thought they would be either acquitted or convicted and given time served and somehow be going back with their families at the end of the day. So that was kind of shocking. I can say for sure that it's not safe to be an Al Jazeera journalist here, and Al Jazeera is banned, so there are none technically here. But in terms of danger for us in general, it's a little too early to say. So far, there haven't been reports of government harassment of any foreign journalists.
And hopefully there won't be any. Thank you so much, Heather, for speaking with us. We appreciate your time as always. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Voice of America's Heather Murdoch reporting from Cairo. Still to come on Network Africa. We take a deeper look at the crisis in South Sudan now that the 8th peace deal has collapsed, with fighting erupting in parts of the world's newest country.